It's April, which in Texas means it's already really sweltery weather. Don't leave anything in the car that you value because it is a sauna in here. I went to work today and it was so hot and I felt really ill. I decided that a hat would greatly help. So I just went to a resale store and bought a hat. And the thing is, I went to a Christian resale store. No big deal. I used to donate to them all the time, especially when I was a Christian. That made me feel really good that I was donating. And on the way checking out, I saw this sign. This sign, which I've never seen. I think it's new. The Office of Spiritual Formation or something like that decided that it was important to put up this sign. And this sign is about the steps to salvation. On the left there it looks like stair steps, and all of them have a verse from Romans listed. Romans something, Romans something, Romans something, and you get closer and closer to Jesus, who's in the middle. And on the right-hand side there are stair steps going in toward Jesus, and they have the fruit of the Spirit. I think the fruit of the Spirit is a lovely set of verses written by Paul, but what frustrates me is that on the left, these steps to Jesus were all written by Paul, supposedly, in the book of Romans, the letter to the Romans, and I find that frustrating. Why so much emphasis on Paul? I know that Jesus is in the middle of that poster, but it's just Jesus' name. Why in all of those stair steps to heaven? Why were none of the quotes from Jesus? I felt a great heartache when I considered how many Christians seemed actually to be Paulians, seemed so much more interested in all of the litigious stuff Paul had to say, as opposed to the less black and white and more accepting things Jesus had to say. Jesus and Paul didn't agree about everything, including Jesus seems to have indicated that the best way to receive an eternal reward is follow the commandments and give all your money to the poor. Nothing about believing in Jesus specifically, although in John you can find that. It seems like Jesus' emphasis was far more on works and on being a nice person, and Paul's letters seem to indicate that faith and belief was more important than actions, or at least his words can be twisted in such a way. I can't put my finger on exactly why I feel frustrated that I would go to a store and see basically a sign about how I need to be saved. And the things that I could be saved from include drunkenness and sorcery, neither of which I participate in. Jealousy, sure, I experience jealousy. I can't really remember the other ones, but I really didn't feel like those words applied to me. It's not free speech, which is bothering me. I think any store should have the right to post pretty much whatever they want, as long as it's not abusive. And by no stretch of the imagination is that poster abusive. The problem is that the implication is, without Jesus, you are an idolater, you are a drunkard, you are, all of those things that were listed on that poster. I would have to ask, what if a person doesn't have all of those problems, and they also don't have Jesus? Like, what if you meet the perfect Mahatma Gandhi? What would a theistic explanation of that be? That person actually has the rule of law in his or her heart, as Paul says. Well then, for what reason do you need a particular religion? Or is that person still damned, which some Christians would say? Hopefully not most, but some would say that. I'm sure some would be able to twist it around and say, well, that person actually is an idolater because anybody who isn't worshiping God clearly is worshiping something. Oh my gosh, I've heard that so many times. If worship is just what you spend your time on, then even Christians worship multiple things. Something interesting you might try the next time someone says, oh, I got saved, or have you been saved, are you saved? Ask the other person, saved from what? I've been trying that a lot in the last few months. I've gotten to ask this question of Christians and people of the Church of Latter-day Saints. I've gotten to ask them this, and you'd be surprised how many people either don't know the answer or don't understand what you're saying, or many people just have an answer that doesn't involve hell at all. Don't get me wrong. I think dropping the doctrine of hell is one of the best things Christianity could do. If Christianity can survive without having to cajole people with threats of hell, that is a strong mark of a religion that can survive the next millennia. But when I've asked people this, said, well, saved from what? And one of the responses I got was, well, what do you mean? Just saved. I mean, you're just saved. That's the thing. It's like saying you've got a stamp, basically, was the answer. You're either saved or you're not. They had no concept that there was anything they were being saved from. When I asked the Latter-day Saints who came to my door, they said kind of an ineffable answer about you're just being saved from your kind of worst self. You get to be a better person. Which begs the question, why do you have to have Jesus to be a better person? Let's say two different people. One person who is spiritual, religious, and one person who is not. And they both decide to make the same decisions to change their lives for the better in the same way. What's a theistic explanation for that? But the point is, I don't know what the point is. I think one of the points is that there are so many different answers in Christianity to all of these situations that I've mentioned. The person who acts just like the ideal Christian but has never heard of Christ. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, in the culture I live in, being a good Christian means being a good person, a good, nice, moral, putting other people not necessarily first, but treating others the way you want to be treated. That's what it means to be quote-unquote Christian. There are lots of different questions you can ask, and if you get a room full of Christians, even if they've just all taken the same Bible study, same theology class together, you ask all of them the same question, and you'll get a different answer for as many people as there are in the room, which I always thought was a wonderful thing about Christianity when I was a Christian. I was in a very open denomination, and I knew that Christianity was as varied as any other group. But the problem is when you meet people who feel that it shouldn't be, people who try to draw very firm lines about either you are a Christian or you aren't. Either you're in my little teeny tiny camp or you're not. In the small town I've been living in, there are two congregations facing off practically across a street from each other. And each one thinks that its is the only congregation in the world that has people that are going to heaven. If you're not a member of that congregation, you are not going to make it. And it seems like such a sad, shallow way to live life. Another question to ask is, are you a Christian or a Paulian? Do you value the words of Jesus more than the words of Paul? Whether you think Paul was an divinely ordained apostle or not, take a look at Paul's writings, or what at least is traditionally ascribed to Paul. Take a look at those words and compare them with the red letters, if you have a red letter Bible. Compare them with what Jesus said. And you may find that you're having to make a choice between the two. Maybe not. Plenty of people can theologically wiggle their way out of the differences or apparent differences between Jesus and Paul. But if you're a theist, if you're a Christian, check it out. As a concluding question, I'll ask, as a Christian, what do you think the logical conclusion, the logical result would be from a religion that emphasizes belief over actions? So I'm signing off, wishing you all peace, and cowboy hats to shade you, and happy spring in the northern hemisphere.